or go into microbiology. You'll get a much better view of this. You'll get a description from somebody who knows more about it, to be perfectly honest. And that's why I say I'm giving you my version of this. So first of all, when we look at defenses in our body, it's pretty universally agreed that we have two major types. We have non-specific defense mechanisms, and we have specific defense mechanisms. I think this one slide can actually help you a lot on board type exams when it comes to immuno. Questions on immuno, very often it comes down to the most basic part of immuno. We have non-specific and specific defenses. So let's make sure we understand the difference here. For non-specific, this is essentially something that's going to help us fight a foreign invader or deal with a problem, and we don't care who the invader is. That's the whole point. That's what's non-specific about it. Your body doesn't care who's causing the problem. We're just going to respond. For specific defenses, when we talk about mounting a specific defense, we must know specifically who is invading us. That's the whole point. If we know exactly who is trying to invade us, we can usually mount a very specific defense against that specific invader. I keep using the same word over and over, but I'm trying to make the point here. So for specific defenses, there must be recognition. Your body must know who the foreign invader is. Now, if you stop and think about it, that takes time. Right? We say we are born with some defense. Okay? We get some of our defense from our mother. Some antibodies come through the placenta, through the umbilical cord. So we are born with some defense. Mom gives us that. But we also just have to live our lives. Right? We have to be exposed to things and then teach our body, this is a foreign invader. Here's how you're going to prepare for it in the future. So, I know you guys are really modern and all, and your parents are probably pretty modern, but I can remember my grandparents and my great-grandparents, and they would talk about when a child in the neighborhood was sick, the mothers in the neighborhood would bring their children to visit. And it wasn't just to make them feel better, it was to expose them. This was how they were building their immune system. You don't hear about that anymore. Nowadays, everything is antimicrobial, because we've got to be sterile. I remember when my wife gave birth to our first child, everybody was giving her all the antibacterial crap. And when we would go visit somebody, she'd make them use the little hand wash before they held the baby. And I kept thinking, that's not right. It's not right. Because you should expose kids to different things. That's how they're going to build their immune system. Kids are tough. They're real tough. They will get sick. They will develop a defense. And the next time they see that same foreign invader, they'll fight it quicker. And the next time they see that foreign invader, they'll fight it so quick they probably won't even know they were exposed to it. That's a good immune system. Is protecting, we're too protective today. We're way too protective. It's a huge industry to make everything antimicrobial. But in reality, the only way to build your immune system is to fight. Get used to fighting foreign invaders. I'm seeing half hands up. Question? Yeah.
So each year when we get the flu vaccine, because it changes, are we trying to jump non-specific and go too specific?
We are, and I'm going to get to that. I've got a little section at the end there. But essentially, first of all, you're not getting the same shot every year.
Right.
Okay? What's happening is people like at the CDC, they're looking at what flus were present in Southeast Asia. And it seems that things come from the east to the west. So they're seeing what were the prevalent flus there. They're designing a mock flu. And what they do is they give you that shot with the mock flu. It's not an active version. And your body sees this foreign invader, but it doesn't get the flu. It sees the foreign invader and it manufactures specific responses to fight that. So then when you really do see the real thing, you skipped a step. Like you said, you skipped a step. You skipped the step where you got real sick. Instead, you've already got some defense ready and waiting. The trick to that, though, is this. Whoops. is that the CDC has to guess right. Right? And typically the flu vaccine has like, I think, 2 or 3 different versions of a flu inside. And they're just guessing as to what will actually come to our country and come to our community. So that's why, I hear people like, I've got a brother who's very ignorant. I love him, but he's just ignorant as hell. He's not very educated, and I don't know if it's related, but he's super religious, so that's a problem. So I go, God will take care of me. Well, bullshit. Okay, God's not going to take care of you. God will take care of some things. But, if you've got flu vaccine present, I think my God wants me to take the shot. Their God doesn't. Their God says, no, we shouldn't take all that. We're just counting on the Lord to keep us protected. And these kids are sick every damn year. It's crazy. They catch everything that's out there. And I say, well, okay, when they're in their 20s, they'll probably be pretty strong because they're catching everything. But you don't have to put them through that nowadays. You can skip a step by taking vaccines. So I'm a big fan of actually using science instead of ignoring it. But anyway, I'm ranting about my brother now. Another question.
It's not really too important, but do you think there's like a use it or lose it kind of thing going on with the immune system? Like you're exposed way back when, will your body really remember?
Well, that's a really good question because we do give some vaccines, and it's been shown that after 20 or 30 years we do lose some of that, and that we talk about now giving boosters for some things. It's giving them another vaccine. So that's a good point. And maybe it's related to the thymus business again. Maybe there's more education going on there than we know. I don't know. But yeah, personally, I'm a big fan of the use it or lose it. And that means everything. Exercising and getting exposed to things. So, but that's a good point. But that just comes back to the original discussion here of just specific versus non-specific defenses. Okay? And I can already tell by your questions, this is a real interesting area, isn't it? It's a really cool area. And that's why you have a separate course to hit a lot of this stuff. Okay? I'm still giving you my version of this. But I want to come back to the non-specifics first. Okay? I just want to briefly mention the non-specifics. This is something where we don't need a prior exposure. Okay? This is something, so I always relate this back to just simple trauma. Whether it's some bacteria that's injected into your body somehow, or whether it's a splinter, the body has non-specific responses to either one. It just says, hey, somebody's invaded me. I'm going to do something about it. Okay? A lot of times we use both. We'll have both happen simultaneously, but I want to divide them up. The non-specific. Okay? First of all, the big defenses are barriers. Your body does already build up nice barriers. We don't need all the sanitizing creams and all that crap. We've got stratified squamous epithelium. We've got sweat. We've got tears. We've got mucus. We've got wax. We have all these things that our body already puts on the surface to protect us. And it's not there for a specific invader. It's there as a general defense. Okay, so we've got all that normal external barrier stuff. Inflammation. Inflammation is a non-specific process. So again, I could say it's a viral infection, a bacterial infection, or a splinter, or a punch. Either way, we can have the same response. Standard inflammation, which we'll cover the cardinal signs of that in just a minute. And then fever. Fever is a nice response, especially to cellular and subcellular infections, to bacteria and viruses. Is when we do get infected with something like that, even though the body may not recognize exactly what's infected us, it knows it's some living stuff, so it decides, okay, we're going to make our body inhospitable. Inhospitable, right? And so we're going to make our temperature rise. And so hopefully the bacteria, the virus will die, or will not be able to reproduce. So that's what a fever is. So once again, in our society, and you can't help it, especially when you have a baby of your own. You love this kid, you don't want them to have any pain or suffering at all in their life. But when they have a fever, that is the body doing something good. The body is trying to drive out whatever the problem is. So really, if we really wanted to be evolutionary about this, we wouldn't give our kids anything. We'd let them have their fever. We'd let it get pretty high because it's helping get rid of what the problem is. But instead, we give medicine and alcohol baths and fan them and all these things to keep their temperature down. We're fighting the body then. The body's doing something to make it inhospitable, and we're making it more hospitable. So again, you know, when my kids got sick, I was always trying to put off going to the doctor. I remember saying, oh, we got to take them, and it's because she loves them. And I know that, but I love them too, and I wanted them to get over it more naturally. So anyway, that's what a fever is. It's also a non-specific response. Amy?
So if you give them medicine to like reduce the fever, would they stay sick longer?
That's what I say. And I think when you actually talk to the researchers in the area, they would say the exact same thing. But when you talk to the parents, they said, but my kid's not crying anymore. They're better. And yeah, you're temporarily taking away some symptoms, but they've still got whatever the infection is. So I think you're exactly right. I think it's going to last longer. So, I'm giving you a lot of personal opinions today, sorry. But you realize that, right? Look at what's on the slide. The personal opinions you can let bounce off if you don't agree. Okay? So, those are 3 nice ways that our body is prepared for anything. Doesn't have to recognize the foreign invader. For the specific ones, there must be recognition. If we don't recognize something and it gets into our body, it's got free reign. Okay? That's what happens when we get some thing into our body that we don't recognize and it kills us. Our body just never mounted a defense. We couldn't recognize there was a foreign invader until it was maybe too late. So we must recognize, and that's the whole point of vaccines. It's teaching our body what's coming. So if you really love your kids, give them vaccines and let the fever go for a while. Now, if the fever gets too high, we start talking 103, 104. Okay, yeah, because now the body's gone a little overboard. And we're getting out of our homeostatic range and we're causing as much harm as we're preventing. That's why you got to monitor these things. But a little fever, you know, 100, 102, sure, the kid's miserable, but the body's doing what it needs to do. Okay, I put a little, for example here for specific defenses, is antibodies. Is what we use in specific defenses really is twofold. We have 2 major specific defenses. We will either manufacture antibodies or we will train certain cells to kill something. So remember what you know about antibodies, right? When did we use antibodies in lab? The blood lab. The blood lab, right? Remember what we did there? Is we said our body, our cells have surface antigens, ID badges. And so we had to take our blood out of our body, put it in a little microscope well, and then we added antibodies. And if the antibody recognized the antigen, it bound to it. And it didn't just bind to one blood cell, it bound to a bunch. To a bunch of them, right? It clumped it all together. And that was bad for us. And that won't flow through our body. So that's why we said, we can't do it inside your body. You've got to take it outside. Well, antibodies are not living structures. They're little proteins that some of our cells will manufacture. In particular, B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes will manufacture antibodies. So if we recognize a foreign invader's antigens, in fact, we can skip the word invader. We can just say if we recognize foreign antigens, then some of our B cells can undergo some neat processes and end up making antibodies. And then they're just flowing through our bloodstream. Those antibodies are there in case the foreign invader comes back. If they see it, clump it together. Once it's clumped together, this patch of bad guys are all clumped together, then macrophages can come in and chew it up. Or certain lymphocytes can come in and chew it up. So there's a neat little battle going on all the time there. So that's one way to fight something off, is produce antibodies. Another way to fight something off is to actually train cells. So things like killer T cells. Maybe you've heard that phrase. Or natural killer cells. Those are usually T lymphocytes. Not B's, but T lymphocytes. And they are living cells that can look around, find a foreign invader, disable it somehow. So 2 different types of specific responses. Antibody or cellular. Right? And that's a good place to quit, I think. Because now we're going to get into some details of the players for each of those. So let's cut off just a couple minutes early here.